Hey, Brady. Hello, and welcome to Age Better.
Thanks, Barbara. Happy to be here.
So, a few weeks ago, we did a really great seminar for the two teams from the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation. I mean, the marathon teams. And thank you so much for that. Everyone loved it. And of course, we talked about a lot of things, but two things that we did talk about are VO2 max and HRV, two metrics that are really, really important. So I thought, not everybody runs marathons and not everybody runs, even as we know. But, everyday people really need to know about these metrics as well. And I know I'm a little obsessed with mine. I have the Oura Ring, I have my Apple Watch, I have the this, I have the that. And so I kind of do keep tabs on that to see how I'm doing. And I really want my audience to learn about these two metrics so that they can, be their healthiest and age better. So let's start with VO2 max, Brady. Let's go. What is it? Let's right to the basics. What is it? And why is it so important, especially for women in midlife, to know what their VO2 max is?
VO2 max, it's very popular these days, is probably one of the reasons we're talking about it. So what VO2 max is your maximum aerobic capacity. And it's essentially the maximum amount of oxygen. It's actually expressed as a rate, so oxygen in liters per minute, but the maximum amount of oxygen that your body can utilize during full body dynamic exercise. That's the exercise physiologist's definition. So it's a bit technical, but basically it is how quickly your body can take oxygen from the air, from the environment, and distribute it throughout your body and turn it into energy when you're exercising or just when you're at rest. We're always using oxygen for energy. And essentially, then what your maximum rate of oxygen is if you are maximally exercising. So think you were to go outside and sprint around your block a few times, or you get on a treadmill and put it as steep as possible and go until you couldn't go anymore. Your oxygen consumption at that point where you can't go anymore, where you would give up, that's your VO2 max. And it was once thought as, and it still is, but this predictor of endurance exercise capacity. So just something important for runners, elite endurance athletes have a high VO2 max, but now we're recognizing that it's important for just health and longevity, which is why it's become so important and something everybody should be interested in measuring, not just endurance athletes.
But why is it so important to
It's
longevity and to health and especially cardiovascular health?
Yeah, it's important because sure, it reflects your exercise ability and maybe good runners have a high VO2 max, but it represents your body's ability to take in oxygen and turn it into energy, which means you have strong lungs. It means you have a strong heart. It means you have strong mitochondria. So it doesn't just reflect how well you can exercise. It reflects your body's integrative ability to produce energy, which essentially is fundamental to all life. I mean, as humans, we are aerobic beings. We thrive through aerobic metabolism, just meaning using oxygen to create energy. And so the better you can do that, the healthier you're going to be, and hopefully the longer you're going to live, as we'll probably talk about. VO2 max is pretty strongly associated with a longer and healthier life.
Yes, in fact, I've seen some medical experts on Instagram and the like talking about how that really is the number you should be looking at to get a sense of how long you think you might really live. And also, kind of your health span, which is even, in my opinion, even more important. But so is there an actual number, like that number is the ideal number for women in midlife? We're talking about now, and we're not talking about elite runners, elite runners like you, athletes, but we're talking about people like me. I mean, I do run and I do a lot of exercise and the like. I think I'm fairly fit, but tell us, is there a perfect number that we should be aspiring to?
I wouldn't say that there's a perfect number, but there are ranges that have been sort of established that will rank you, telling you if you're average or below average or above average or elite, kind of as you mentioned. And so I would say for middle-aged women, they should be looking for a score anywhere between probably 40 and 50 would be really good for a middle-aged woman. There's some people out there saying if you're age 50, regardless of kind of whether you're male or female, that 50 is kind of the number to maybe shoot for. So I would say that shooting for that 40 to 50 number is great. If you're anywhere below that, probably some room for improvement. If you're in the 30s, that suggests you might have a little bit of room to improve. anything above 50, that's pretty indicative of a well-trained athlete. Certainly if you're a middle-aged woman and you have a VO2 max over 50, fantastic. Like you're in a sweet spot. And then, you may see endurance athletes with scores of 60s, 70s, and 80s. So I would say the 40 to 50 range, if you look on whatever device that you have and it has that, probably a good indication. We'll maybe also talk later about ways to measure VO2 max. But yeah, so that's what, that would be my recommendation for a score. And if people are curious to look up, where they might rank, they can go and Google, just like VO2 max standardized age ranges and probably find a good chart for that. But that
Right.
number I provided, probably a pretty good recommendation.
And does it change as you get older? I'm assuming it does, right?
Well, it does, but it's so nuanced. And, there's this kind of trope that, oh, VO2 max, just like muscle mass, it declines with age. You get older and your VO2 max goes down. That generally appears to be true, but that is just because what else typically happens as we get older? Well, we typically exercise a little bit less. And so if you maintain activity levels, you maintain your training, there is probably some ability to maintain your VO2 max. And if you are a middle-aged woman and haven't really trained seriously before, you can improve your VO2 max at age 50. There's no reason why you can't. So in general, there's a decline, but that doesn't mean it's always going to happen.
Okay, let's talk about how we can reverse it, make it better, improve it. How do we do that?
Yeah, well, the short answer would be aerobic exercise. And the long answer would be doing a ideal combination of what we'll call maybe zone 2 training and high intensity interval training. So zone 2 training is the popular term for it, but really when I say that, what I kind of mean is just low to moderate intensity endurance training, your steady state cardio, your 30 to 60 minute brisk walk or run on a treadmill or bicycle ride, something like that. Doing that 2 to 3 times per week, probably for 150 minutes total, is going to be a great way to get your aerobic base and establish your aerobic base, kind of have that foundation. But what really is going to push that ceiling up, so improve your VO2 max, is the high intensity interval training. And this would be, if people want to think about high intensity interval training, going pretty hard. So if we were to think about effort, like a 7, 8, 9, or a 10 out of 10 effort for anywhere from 1 to 4 minutes, resting a little bit and repeating it, your high intensity interval training type of stuff, running sprints around a track, higher intensity bike riding if you're on a Peloton or taking a spin class at the gym, things like that, things where you're breathing hard, you can't talk, your heart rate's up 80% or more of your maximal heart rate. Things like that are going to improve your VO2 max substantially.
Talking about that, I mentioned to you a few times when we spoke offline that I am a runner. I started running at 50 and my VO2 max was really, really good for a long time. And then due to a stress fracture and then some arthritis in my knee, I'm a bit sidelined at the moment. And so it took a little while for me to get back on track with other things, I have to admit. And the audience has heard me talk about this before. Sorry, everyone. But, the VO2 max, I did see it did go down, but now I've gotten it back up because I've been doing something really interesting, because not everybody runs. I mean, you mentioned running, sprinting as something, and not everybody will be doing that. However, you can go on a rower, you can go on a bike, a Peloton, and so on. You mentioned a few for sure. You can also do circuits with different equipment in the gym, right? But what I've been doing, and I find it really very satisfying, is the Japanese interval walking training program. It's kind of like a little version of the Norwegian 4x4. But in this case, it's 3x3, and you're slow walking for 3 minutes, and then you're speed walking as fast as you can. And I put a little running into my speed walking time to kind of really get my heart rate up. And then, 3 and 3 and 3, and you repeat. So is that enough to really do the trick? Or do you really need to get that? Like how high should that heart rate be for that, 3 to 4 minutes?
It should be anywhere. It should be at 85% of your maximal heart rate or above. So between, and probably even 80, so 80% to 100% of your maximal heart rate. And now I know not everybody probably knows what their maximal heart rate is. A very rough way to approximate it is to take 220 and subtract your age. But there are a lot of limitations with that. And so the best way, the best way would be to actually measure it, which is kind of hard unless you're actually going to maximal exercise once. So the best way, estimate it if you're not really concerned about it being that accurate. So say if you're 50 years old, Your, predicted maximum heart rate would be somewhere around 170, and then 80 to 100% of that is where you want to target for those high intensity interval training. And you mentioned walking. I mean, I don't want to single out any modality as being the best, because certainly anything will work. Rower, Peloton, walking, running. If you are going to walk, the problem some people might have is that with walking, you might not be able to walk fast enough to get your heart rate up. So
Yep.
my recommendation there would be, well, go get a treadmill at the gym and just crank that thing up to like 8%, 9%, 10% grade. So walk at
Yeah.
an incline, because you can walk slow. And if you're walking up a hill, your heart rate's going to get up there pretty quickly. So
Definitely.
walking
Definitely.
is completely fine. Basically, getting your heart rate in that target range is the key. So no matter what you're doing, it's really the heart rate that matters, not what you're doing that
Not what
actually
you're
matters.
doing. It's the amount of time. I just want to be clear on that. Like 3 to 4 minutes, stay in that zone.
Three to
or
four
what?
minutes. 3 to 4 minutes is great if you're going to maybe do a little bit lower of a heart rate. So if you're going to say be at 80 to 85%, that 3 to 4 minute interval range appears to be great. And maybe just match that with a similar amount of rest, just like you're doing. So hard for 3 to 4 minutes, easy for 3 to 4 minutes. Repeat it anywhere from 6 to 8 times maybe, but you could do less. You could do just 4 times too.
Got it. Wow, it's
And you
amazing.
can
There
work
really
up.
isn't a lot of time that that will really help you to improve your VO2 max. It's like not a huge time commitment, is
Well,
it?
that's kind of the perk of the high intensity interval training, is that you can do, 20 to 30 minutes of it a couple times per week, and it will give you the benefits of, saying, doing several hours of lower intensity training.
Yep, yep. When I really did a deep dive into the science behind this Japanese IWT, because I was intrigued by it since I was kind of limited as to what I could do with my hurt knee. And so I was intrigued and did start to do it. But as you pointed out, I just wasn't able to get my heart rate up there by just walking alone. I just am still not able to, because my heart's in pretty good shape, and I have to really anyway. So I do find that I will add a little bit of running, as I said, like 30 seconds of running, and then speed walk, and then 30 seconds of running within that 3 minute. And that's really helped me considerably to kind of achieve my goal. But anyway, lots of ways to do it is your point.
Definitely.
But doing it, how many times a week is ideal?
I think if there's someone who, say, is dedicating 2 to 4 days per week to do some type of aerobic exercise, I would say make 2 of those fairly high intensity. This doesn't mean you're sprinting as hard as you can 2 days per week, but 2 days per week, get your heart rate elevated. And do those, 20 to 30 minutes at a time. And then make those other 1 to 2 sessions of the week. Those can be kind of your easy, go on a brisk long walk for 60 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that. So I would say 2 days per week, 1 day per week minimum. 2 days per week is certainly great if you're really looking to improve your VO2 max. And if you're training for something, if somebody's a runner, they're going to do 1 speed workout per week. If you're training for general health and fitness, I think you could afford 2 interval sessions in there. Just obviously make sure, like everything, to not overdo it.
Yep, exactly. I do it 2 or 3 times a week. Curious, strength training, another big passion of mine now. Does that help with VO2 max?
Depending on who you ask, I think they might have a different answer. My answer, kind of based on the evidence, is no. Ideally, if you're trying to really improve your aerobic capacity and improve your cardiovascular health, the way to do that is through aerobic exercise. And strength training, it just works through different mechanisms. Kind of, people will say, oh, well, my heart rate is elevated when I'm resistance training. And that does occur. I mean, if you are doing hard resistance training, even if if you're doing squats or deadlifts, or heck, maybe even doing some dumbbell curls, your heart rate might get pretty high. But, without going too deep into the details on why it happens, the heart rate's increasing for a different reason than it is when you are doing some type of dynamic, chronic kind of like cardio, going for a walk or running or riding a bike. So you're just not getting those same adaptations. The heart is working differently when you're resistance training with a higher blood pressure compared to if you're running. And so you're just not going to improve your VO2 max as much through resistance training. Now, if you've never exercised before in your life and you start resistance training, your VO2 max will probably go up just because you're exercising, of course. But if you're somebody who exercises regularly and have a decent VO2 max and want to further increase it, resistance training probably isn't going to be the way to do that. So I just like to say, leave the weight room for getting stronger and possibly building more muscle and increasing bone density, and reserve the aerobic exercise for improving your VO2 max.
Yep, couldn't agree more. And thank you for that. So let's move over now to HRV, the other metric that I want to talk about today. So what is HRV, heart rate variability, and why is it so important for us to know about?
Heart rate variability, it's an interesting measure, and I think especially interesting because nowadays everybody kind of has the ability to measure it with an Oura Ring or your smartwatch. So what heart rate variability is
I'm showing both.
oh yeah, you got both of them, as do I. I have a watch on this hand and an Oura Ring on this hand.
Yeah.
So if you think about your heart rate, so say somebody has a heart rate of 60 beats per minute. That means every minute your heart is beating 60 times. But in between each of those beats, there isn't the same amount of time interval. So you might have half a second between one beat to the next, and then you might have a third of a second between one beat to the next. So the interval between each heartbeat in that minute is different. So your heart is beating at a steady 60 beats per minute, but it isn't beating one beat every exact interval of time, if that's maybe the best way to put it. So variability is the variability in between those beats, and it's expressed in milliseconds. And higher is good when we think about HRV. So why is that? Well, your heart rate and the variability between those beats is controlled by your autonomic nervous system, so your central nervous system. And if it's in a, say, healthy, rested state, non-stressed state, it's going to affect your heart in a way that allows more variability in between the beats. And so when people say a higher HRV is better, that's why. It means your sympathetic nervous system is sort of rested, acting in accordance with how it should. Maybe you're not stressed. And that's why HRV is kind of used as this index of stress. Although HRV
resilience and physical
stress,
resilience, right?
Resilience, recovery, it's kind of used as all of these different measures. Because when your autonomic nervous system is recovered, your HRV is going to be high. You're going to have more variability in between those beats. When it's low, then on the other hand, say you're stressed or you're not recovered or you're maybe quote unquote burnt out, however we want to define that, then the variability between those beats is lower. So that means your autonomic nervous system just really isn't controlling the variability between those beats as well as it could. And so it reflects a perhaps non-recovered state. So a lower HRV is generally seen to be worse. Higher HRV is generally seen to be better. And that's definitely different than, we'll just contrast it with resting heart rate, which most people know, and that's just your heart rate in beats per minute, like when you wake up in the morning.
Right. And we do want a lower resting heart rate. I mean, that's always the goal.
Generally better. Yep. I think, there's certainly a point where your heart rate could probably be too low. Your resting heart rate might be too low. But generally, as people get fitter, if you get more in shape, your resting heart rate is going to be lower. So lower is better to a point. Somewhere between 40 and 60 is probably a great resting heart rate that people could aim for. Right.
Even at this age, by the way. Even at this age. Yes. I mean, a lot of these numbers will change as you get older. And I've read when I've taken my own deep dives, there's not a lot you can do. I mean, there are things you can do, of course, and we've been discussing many of them. But, the body still changes as we get older and it gets harder. It becomes more of a challenge to achieve those numbers that we're looking for, like the lower resting heart rate and the higher HRV and so on and so forth. But it's not impossible, and I think that's the big message. So is there a normal number? Like, is there a number that we should just strive for or just aim for high? Like, is there some magic number, sweet spot?
Unlike VO2 max or resting heart rate, there really isn't a range for HRV because it's so individual. So what I tend to recommend to people is all you can do is just compare yourself to yourself rather than look at ranges. You could probably, search the internet and find different ranges, but the problem with HRV is that say you're measuring it with a Whoop or with a Garmin or with an Oura Ring. They all kind of have their different little algorithms. And so they're all going to give you different numbers. If I told you my HRV for my watch and my Oura Ring and then I wore a Whoop strap overnight, I could wake up in the morning and have 3 different numbers from all of those different devices.
Yep, that's right.
So there's not really a say, 100 is good. That's what the HRV you want to shoot for. I think you have to see it over time, right? You have to see your number over time. You have to look at the trends and just say, am I higher today than my average or am I lower today than my average? So HRV is one of those things where I would say people don't compare yourself to anybody else. Just look at your own numbers and see, are you trending up or are you trending down compared to say your, monthly average for HRV? That would be the best way to interpret that number.
Right. And then how do you actually track your HRV number? You mentioned a few things like, whoop, my daughter has one of those. I have an Aura Ring, as I pointed out a few times, as well as an Apple Watch I've had for a number of years. And to your point, I mean, each day I have two completely different numbers from, the Aura Ring and then the Apple Watch. And when I did another deep dive about like, what do each of these things do, who is more accurate, and so on. I mean, I've read that with sleep and heart rate, really the Aura Ring is more accurate. And then, the Apple Watch is better with steps and activity and so on and so forth. But I'm just curious what you think. Like, do you have a recommendation for if someone right now is listening and saying, wow, I want to be able to track my VO2 max and my HRV. What should I get if they don't yet have something? What would it be?
Yeah, so, without kind of ranking the devices, because I obviously have my preferences, I do think something like the Aura
I
Ring
want to know what your preferences are, actually.
For HRV, for heart rate, and for sleep, I definitely prefer Aura Ring, and that is simply because I think their algorithms are, it's meant to be a sleep tracking device. It was never meant to be, when it comes to fitness tracking, I don't use Aura because it's on my finger. It doesn't have a screen. I don't want to use it to track fitness. I want my Coros watch because that's what it's built for. It's built to track fitness. Right. So for sleep, for HRV, for resting heart rate, I love the Aura Ring for that, especially just because, again, their sensors are kind of designed and their algorithms are validated to measure your sleep and measure your HRV. So that's kind of my preference, and I do think that there's some good evidence to say Aura Ring's probably best for that. Something like an Apple Watch could also be great. Something like a Whoop could also be great. I think the key here is just use the same device. If you're interested in seeing if your VO2 max is going to improve, if your HRV is going to improve, don't say, look at your Whoop one day and look at your Aura the next day and look at your Apple Watch the next day. Pick a device and say, this is my dedicated device to track X metric. And also make sure to look at it at the same time of day and sort of under similar conditions. So I think one of the perks of, say, something like Aura and measuring HRV is it's going to measure it overnight. And overnight, you're generally going to be in a similar state. So your breathing rate is going to be similar, your body position is similar, and those things impact specifically heart rate variability, very impacted by your body position and your respiratory rate. So the best you can standardize those things, the better. And when you're sleeping, to some degree, all those things are going to be standardized. So yeah, I would just say, regardless of the device you pick, everybody has their preferences, but just make sure you're using the same one. You're looking at it or measuring it at the same time of day, and just tracking that trend over time.
Yep. Yeah. I'm a big fan of the Aura Ring. I've had it since December, I think. And I just think it's remarkable, the information that I've gotten from it. And my Apple Watch, too, I think is remarkable, but for different reasons, as you just pointed out.
For sure. Yeah.
And then you set it up. I figured out finally how to set up things, different sources of data as priority sources in the whole system, and like in the health system of the Apple Watch. All right, we're going too deep into that detail now, but it is really fun. It's more than fun. It's really, I think, very important for you all, if you are interested in checking your HRV, to see how it's going, and something as simple as an Aura Ring can help you to do that. So what are some habits that people can adopt or improve on to help with their HRV, like sleep and maybe meditation, stress, getting rid of stress, eating? I don't know. What are some of the things that we can do to improve the HRV?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the perhaps like unsexy basics that everybody is aware, but I think stress probably when it comes to HRV is one of the biggest ones. I mean, stress, the body, it's funny because we always talk about stress and the body really doesn't differentiate between really different types of stress. So, I mean, we all like to think that exercise is good for us, but if you exercise too much, that can be stressful. So
it is.
You can
right.
really
it pops up very often on my Aura Ring that, you're in an engaged state or a stressed state, but I had just, done a 30-minute interval walking training thing with running.
Yeah.
So I was stressed.
If I have a heavy day of exercise, I'll look at my Aura and I'll say, you're experienced more stress than usual today.
Yes.
I said, well, yeah, I just, worked out for 3 hours. So it's a stress, and you have to allow your body to recover. So I won't say avoid stress. Avoiding stress not only is it not necessary, it's probably not beneficial. I think stress is good because it can help us adapt. I just think during the day, give yourself periods to kind of cool down and relax, even if it's only for 5 to 10 minutes. It's something that I've personally been doing. We were chatting beforehand about how the Aura has kind of these built-in meditation features. The best thing that I have found that will lower my, when you open your Aura Ring app and you see the little stress tracker throughout the day, the thing that impacts that the most for me is if I just shut down for 10 minutes after lunch, lay on the ground and do breathing exercises for 10 minutes, that lowers my stress level. My HRV goes back up. So I would just say take just a break during the day where you're not looking at a screen, where you're not on a call, where you're not really looking at anything stimulating, and just relax. So that could be meditation, that could be, whatever, but just take these like cool down breaks, I think. So that's important. I think can help you recover just like in the middle of the day, and you'll see it in your own data. I think that's one of the fun things about having these wearables is you can do something and immediately kind of see how that's affecting your HRV, for sure.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I do that for fun sometimes. And when I do exactly what you were just saying, I'll just have a few minutes. I'm going to just do a little bit of rest meditation, if you will. And then I look at my resting heart rate and it might be elevated because I've just done something active. And then I'll just do the breathing and I'll watch it go down and go down. It's like fun.
For sure, yeah.
I've even like recorded it on my phone and like posted it. Like, you can do this too. You can make your heart rate go down.
The feedback stuff is fun. So I would just say, at least every day, do something where you're just actually focusing on breathing. Because really, if you think about it, a lot of us just go throughout the day and our body breathes naturally, even without thinking about it. But when we do think about it, it can actually benefit our stress levels and therefore our HRV. So I think that's a pretty well evidenced way to improve your HRV. And then obviously it's just, get adequate sleep, exercise a good amount, not probably too much or not too little for HRV. But then I think there are a few things specifically that you can avoid that seem to negatively impact HRV. So, everybody will claim this and I see it in my own data, but alcohol close to sleep tends to really just wreck your heart rate variability as well as all the other sleep quality things. So,
I've seen that personally. I've seen that personally when I've had some wine and then, my sleep is not as good. And then the next day I see a difference in the HRV report.
Totally. So, this isn't to say never have a few drinks, but
right. I've read I've already mentioned in the introduction, what you do. And in your Physiologically Speaking newsletter, I remember reading one about the whole discussion about alcohol. And there's nothing really good about alcohol, but I think you're still maybe imbibing on occasion. Still.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, one or two drinks a week, of course. I enjoy every once in a while, but there's no doubt that it negatively affects your HRV. So I would just say avoiding those at least close to sleep seems to be the best time, but at any time of day, it's obviously going to have a bit of an impact. So avoiding that and heavy meals, especially close to sleep, I think that you can maybe snack at night, but I think eating a huge meal and then going right to bed, body temp's elevated, HRV is going to be down. So if you're really looking to say from day to day, those are kind of the acute things. Like your chronic HRV, I think, is more impacted by your regular level of exercise, your regular level of sleep, how consistent you are with those. But if it's just, I'm looking to what immediately impacts my HRV, it's the alcohol, it's like heavy meals before sleep. And those are things that you can do that will impact it right away.
But what is it about HRV if it's low? Like why is it bad for your heart? Why is that?
So it's not bad for your heart per se. It's just a reflection of what's going on with your body.
Okay.
So I would say the actual effect of having a low HRV, that's not necessarily doing damage to your heart directly.
To your heart. It's just
having a high HRV good for your heart directly, but they're reflecting that your body is overly stressed or that it's perhaps not recovered enough. So they're more an output of a body that is under stress or well recovered versus this is actively detrimental. But with something like resting heart rate, though, that can actively perhaps be detrimental. So if your high resting heart rate all the time, that's not necessarily good for your heart. It's probably actively doing something to your heart. HRV, on the other hand, probably isn't actually having that type of direct effect.
Got it. All right. That very, very important point. So what is one thing that you wish every woman listening right now to this conversation would do to improve both the VO₂ Max and the HRV? Is there one thing or is that too tricky?
No, I think the answer here would perhaps just be, and I talked about how important high intensity interval training is for VO₂ Max, but probably just go on more walks. And, even if you're a man that happens to be listening to this, go on more walks. I think walking is sort of one of these underrated health hacks, and not necessarily from a fitness improvement perspective. But if you just think about it, if you go on a walk without your phone and just kind of go maybe on a trail and are looking at the scenery and you come back, you don't feel worse than when you left. So your HRV is probably definitely going to be better because you kind of lowered your stress levels, like I was just talking about, especially if it's like a walk in nature. There's this whole thing called forest bathing now that, I haven't dug into the research on, but it's this practice of just going on a walk into the woods.
I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah,
Again, there's some really good research coming out of Japan about forest bathing. Yeah,
for sure. So a walk in the woods. But in addition to that, just the benefits for, say, blood sugar regulation, walking before or after a meal, certainly beneficial. If you're going on a walk with somebody, that's social interaction, that's good for your HRV. And then again, I think there can be then the fitness benefits of walking. If you're briskly walking or just for that zone 2 or zone 1 training to build that aerobic base, it is beneficial. And the great thing about walking is it's low impact. The great and bad thing I think about walking, maybe I'll come back to the bad thing, but it's low impact. And so you can do almost unlimited of it. You can walk as much as you want. You're not going to really hurt yourself. You're not going to burn out. So it's a great way to just get a lot of low intensity activity that can support the higher intensity stuff that will improve your VO2 max.
Yes.
I said one of the downsides.
Yeah,
well,
what's the bad thing?
The bad thing is that it's low impact. So a lot of women think that walking will be good for, say, improving bone mineral density, but it's really not. It's very bad at it. It doesn't really improve bone mineral density at all. It's not high impact enough. For that, you need to be strength training, you need to be jumping, you need to be doing kind of higher impact stuff.
Right. Exactly right. Thank you for this, Brady. You just gave me a great entree into telling everyone yet again. I know you heard this last week, everyone, but I did start the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation walking clubs. I started one in Virginia. I go back and forth between New York and Virginia because I couldn't run. I said, well, I'm bored. I'm walking, but I want everyone else to go with me. And so I started walking clubs, and they were rolling them out across the country. And yes, it is from the BHOF, which does focus on bone health, of course. There is some research that says a little bit of pounding as you're walking will help. It certainly doesn't hurt your bones, okay? But you do need to be doing more. You need to do strength training. We know that for sure, and we talk about that all the time. But it also checks all the boxes. You're outside, check. You're with others, socializing and connecting. Check, major check, right? And of course, you're walking and hopefully in that zone 2, to keep up the pace in zone 2. So we have this group going, and we do 3 times a week. And like I said, it's being rolled out throughout the country. And anyone, if you want to get more information, just contact me at agebetterpodcast@gmail.com. So Brady, this was a great conversation. In the show notes, everyone, is more information about Brady, about his newsletters. I am a fan of his. I'm a fan of both of his newsletters. And then he has a podcast. And then he's taken over one of the newsletters from Amby Burfoot, who won the Boston Marathon in 1968, was it, Brady?
Right.
68. Yep. I mean, just like a legend in the running world. And Brady, you're just amazing. And as I said, I'm a super duper fan of yours. And so all that information will be in the show notes, everyone. But before I let you go, Brady, I always like to ask this of my guests. What are your 3 biggest takeaways you really want my audience to remember from this conversation today?
The first would be that, and this sounds such like a cliche, but really you're never too old to either improve your fitness or keep maintaining your fitness. I think that as much as one of the most interesting things in research that I've been reading these days is these studies in people who are 50, 60, 70, who they just continually show you can build muscle, you can increase your VO2 max. It requires hard training. You can't, it's not going to come easy, but you can really get better and stronger and faster at any age. So it's pretty remarkable. I think that, like 50 is kind of the new 30, I guess, is maybe how they want to say it. So you can get better, you can get stronger at any age. It sounds like a cliche, but it's really a kind of a science-backed thing. I think the second one would be keep your 2 modes of exercise distinct. So we already mentioned this, but, combining, say, trying to get your aerobic exercise through your strength training, probably not the best strategy if you really want to get well at both. So when you're in the gym, focus on getting strong, focus on building muscle. And then when you're doing your aerobic exercise, focus on getting your heart rate up. Don't try to kind of substitute your resistance training for cardio. I don't think that's probably the optimal strategy. And I think the final thing would be, we focus a lot on training and, doing things to get better and get fitter. But I think that one of the underrated aspects is recovery. And that doesn't mean doing anything fancy to recover. Sometimes that just means laying off, relaxing, doing things you enjoy, and you'll get better kind of in the process. We do really get better when we are recovering. And I don't think we necessarily have to do fancy things or use fancy gadgets to recover. Just eat well, sleep right, and sort of socialize and have fun, and you'll improve your fitness.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I'd like to just add that I really think if you all are interested in really getting a handle on these two metrics, you may want to consider getting an Oura ring. I mean, I'm not pushing it. I have no sponsorship from them, but I'm really enjoying it and I find it very motivating. And also it's a great way to test things like, oh, if I do this, did it work or did it not work? Or if I didn't drink or if I slept a different way or different hours, it's really interesting. I mean, if you take this seriously as I do. So you may want to consider that. Super simple to wear. And, as you can see, Brady and I are both fans of it. So consider it.
I would agree. I just think that, a lot of people will say we're maybe over optimizing and we have too much data at our fingertips. If we're talking about the Oura ring, literally, at our fingertips. But there's no harm in having the data. I really do think that we're advancing at such a fast rate in terms of science and especially with AI these days that collecting as much data on yourself as you can now is a good thing, because one of these days we're going to be able to use it. You're going to be able to use it to maybe predict disease or let it tell you what you should eat or how you should train. I don't think we're really at that level yet, but just one of these days you're going to be happy if you're start collecting all of this health data. And as you mentioned, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to wake up every morning and open my app and see, oh, how did I sleep? And you don't let it affect you too much, but it's just fun to see. And there can be some actionable things in there. So I would encourage anybody to, yes, I'm partial to Oura Ring. I think they're great. Again, I also have no affiliation with them, but just buy some sort of tracker that will get your sleep stuff and your cardiovascular health stuff that you can start measuring right now. I mean, and that makes things easier because if you're not measuring it, you can't really tell if you're improving or not.
Right. Couldn't agree more. Brady, thank you so much. I really hope you'll come back because I have a slew of other questions to ask you about a lot of different topics related to this and related to aging better. So I really do hope you'll come back.
Anytime.
Okay. Thank you again, everyone. See you next week.